Steven Tyler turned 77 in 2025, and at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, something happened that caught even seasoned fans off guard. When the cameras panned across the stage, they captured him without the familiar shield of stage makeup. The face the world saw was unfiltered, deeper creases than many expected, etched across his forehead like the lines of a long-lived story. But the real shock came later. In recent photographs, his hands tremble. Doctors trace it back to the life he once lived at full volume. The man who could roar through stadiums for hours now speaks in a voice barely above a breath. And the truth behind the changes in his appearance is far more complex than anyone realized. Steven Victor Tallarico entered the world on March 26, 1948, at the Stastton Polyclinic Hospital in Manhattan, an institution that had cared for generations of New Yorkers before closing its doors in 1978. His father, Victor, was a classical pianist and a devoted music teacher. His mother, Susan, carried her Polish heritage with quiet strength. Their home was a place of rules and discipline, shaped by the steady rhythm of piano keys. Steven grew up surrounded by music, yet he always felt the walls were a little too tight around him. The one thing that made him feel alive, music, also became the battlefield where he and his parents clashed. They wanted precision. He wanted release. That tension settled into his bones long before he ever stepped beneath stage lights. When Steven was 3, the family relocated to the Bronx, hoping the change would ease their lives. It didn't. The neighborhood kids chipped away at his confidence. He was thin, curly-haired, and walked a little differently, traits that made him an easy target in the Bronx of the 1950s. The teasing turned physical, and each day at school brought a fresh sting. He pushed back, sometimes at teachers, sometimes at anyone who cornered him. Home wasn't much easier. His father's rigid practice schedule left him feeling like the only place he could breathe was outside. By the age of 6, he found a strange kind of sanctuary in the parks, where street-corner doo-wop groups rehearsed beneath the glow of the lamps. He would watch them, imagining what it would feel like to stand before people who actually wanted to hear him. In 1957, when he was 9, the Tallaricos moved again, this time to a quiet suburban street at 100 Pembroke Drive in northeast Yonkers. The city noise faded, but Steven's imagination only grew louder. He discovered drums when he was 8 and built his first kit from pots, pans, and cardboard boxes. Late at night, he slipped Elvis Presley records into his room and mimicked every twist and vocal inflection, hoping no one noticed. While Victor filled the living room with Beethoven, Steven embraced rock and roll in the shadows. That quiet clash between classical tradition and raw rebellion shaped the performer he would one day become, an artist capable of whispering, growling, and soaring in a single breath. Around the age of 10, he stumbled onto a family secret he never forgot. His grandfather had been a bootlegger during the Prohibition era, dodging police while running illicit alcohol across New York. Steven reveled in the story. It convinced him that defiance might be part of his lineage, something wired into him. If his grandfather could break the mold, maybe he was destined to, too. The idea fueled him, and he carried it like a badge. Asthma struck early and fiercely. He spent long days indoors, struggling for breath, convinced his lungs were working against him. While other children ran outside, he lay in bed imagining himself on bright stages in front of roaring crowds. Every asthma attack trapped him, every fantasy set him free. Those solitary hours shaped the showman he would one day become. His lung-splitting screams and high-flying leaps weren't just theatrics, they were the physical escape routes he invented as a boy. By 1962, at 14, he had poured all that restless energy into a band called The Strangers. They soon reinvented themselves as Chain Reaction, and Steven first sat behind the drum kit. But in 1964, during a chaotic garage rehearsal, he let out a raw scream that echoed Little Richard. The room fell silent. His bandmates insisted he step forward, and in that instant, everything changed. At 16, he was already sharing stages with acts like the Beach Boys and the Byrds. He wore towering platform shoes and draped himself in scarves long before those looks became synonymous with his name. Teachers were less impressed. They suspended him for what they called indecent behavior. Steven didn't care. He was following something bigger than school rules. In 1966, a marijuana incident got him expelled from Roosevelt High School. He transferred to the Quintano School for Young Professionals in Manhattan, paying his way by busking on the streets and selling handmade leather goods. His days became a tangle of music, small hustles, and late-night gatherings where drugs flowed freely. His father hoped Stephen would one day follow the discipline of classical music. Stephen was already too deep into rock's untamed current. Quintano immersed him in the heart of 1960s counterculture. That energy soaked into his voice, his writing, and his entire persona. A year later, in 1967, a trip to a New Hampshire ski resort led him to bassist Tom Hamilton. They bonded instantly over their shared love of Jimi Hendrix and spent the night jamming. No one realized it then, but the earliest spark of Aerosmith had just been lit. By 1968, the Vietnam draft loomed over every young man. Stephen marched in protests, evaded police, and slept in band vans to avoid arrest. Some of his friends were drafted and never returned. His own drug use and rebellious record pushed him outside the draft's acceptable boundaries. That era forged his lifelong refusal to be controlled by anyone or anything. By 1969, he was performing in Boston clubs with Chain Reaction, where he dove into crowds shirtless, igniting scenes that bordered on riots. Band arguments were constant, but audiences couldn't look away. Boston became his proving ground, a place to sharpen the wild force that would later erupt across arenas worldwide. And then came July 31st, 1970. In a cramped room in Boston's Fenway neighborhood, Steven Tyler joined Joe Perry, Tom Hamilton, Joey Kramer, and Ray Tabano. That day, the band that would define generations, Aerosmith, was born. The name Aerosmith emerged from a hazy blend of imagination, a comic Steven once flipped through, and a dream he experienced during a rehearsal while drifting in and out of a high. In those early days, the band didn't have rehearsal studios or comfortable spaces. They played wherever they could, dim basements, cramped apartments, rooms too small to hold their ambition. Dinner often meant instant noodles. Sleep came on couches, floors, and sometimes not at all. Rejection echoed from every direction, but Steven kept the vision locked in his mind. Their first true performance arrived on November 6, 1970, at Nipmuc Regional High School in Upton, Massachusetts. Barely 200 teenagers showed up. Steven tore into Mama Kin, and by the end of the night, frustration over the band's tiny $50 payment exploded. He smashed Joey Kramer's drum set on stage, and the argument spilled into the parking lot until police intervened. Yet the chaos had an unexpected effect. People talked. A band that unpredictable was impossible to ignore. By June 1972, Aerosmith finally caught a break. Columbia Records signed them for roughly $125,000 after producer Danny Goldberg witnessed the mayhem of their performance at Lenny's on the Turnpike. Smoke filled the room. The audience roared. And there, in the haze, Steven stood as if the stage belonged entirely to him. Columbia took a risk, but it was the opening the band had been fighting for. The road that followed in 1971 and 1972 was unforgiving. The band crisscrossed the Northeast in a van splashed with psychedelic paint. It had no beds, no bathroom, and no comforts. They washed up at truck stops, survived on cheap meals, and pushed through exhaustion. Steven even threw up on stage once after eating spoiled hot dogs, but he kept going, and the crowd never stopped cheering. That van became their rolling bunker, carrying sweat, arguments, and wild hopes. It shaped everything they would become. By the end of 1972, the pressure inside the band reached a boil. Steven and Joe Perry clashed over lyrics and control, and Aerosmith teetered on the edge of breaking. A trip to Sunapee, New Hampshire, changed the trajectory. They drank, partied, and made a pact to rise together rather than burn each other down. When they returned, their focus sharpened. They removed guitarist Ray Tabano, whose unreliability had become a problem, and brought in Brad Whitford, whose steady presence grounded the band. But Steven was already slipping into heroin, a shadow that frightened everyone around him. Even so, the group locked in and began recording their debut album at Intermedia Studios in Boston between late 1972 and early 1973. Steven's unpolished vocals on Mama Kin startled the label but exhilarated the band. They refused to tame the sound. When the album was released in January 1973, the world barely noticed at first, but it marked the beginning. Every messy rehearsal, every fight, every dream woven into those tracks created the foundation that would eventually carry Aerosmith to legendary status. By 1974, Steven walked into the record plant in New York with a voice still youthful but a determination that felt decades older. The band was scrambling to finish Get Your Wings, and only one task remained, the vocals on Lord of the Thighs. Producer Jack Douglas pushed Stephen harder than anyone had before. Tyler recorded harmonies for 12 straight hours, layering voice upon voice until it felt like something inside him had begun to tear. By the end of the session, blood slid down the back of his throat. But he didn't stop. That final, gritty sound transformed the band's music and marked their first true leap toward stardom. It was also the first clear sign that Steven Tyler's body would pay a price for his devotion to rock and roll. Dream On had been living quietly inside Steven since 1969, just a piano ballad he would play alone. It wasn't until its 1975 re-release that everything changed. The song rocketed to number 6, and suddenly every station wanted it. But Steven's interviews, raw, unfiltered, and often laced with profanity, set off a firestorm. When local Boston broadcasters censored him, he mocked them on air. Some stations banned him. The ban only fueled the song's rise. Dream On became the anthem that made Aerosmith inescapable, and it cemented Tyler as a figure born to defy authority. By the time California Jam arrived in 1975, Aerosmith was living like there were no consequences. 250,000 fans crowded into the Ontario Motor Speedway as Steven sprinted across the stage, climbing the drum riser before launching himself 20 feet into the air. He landed wrong and shattered his heel, but kept singing as cameras rolled and the crowd roared. The pain didn't matter. The moment became part of rock history, a symbol of how far he would go for the audience. That same year, the band released Toys in the Attic, and out of a 20-minute riff came Walk This Way. Steven scribbled the lyrics on the stairwell walls of the record plant because he didn't have paper or patience. In the middle of recording, he kept himself awake by snorting cocaine off the mixing console. Producer Jack Douglas later admitted that no one slept during those sessions, everyone was chasing some unpredictable edge. The habits were dangerous, but the results rewrote music. Walk This Way bridged genres, touching rock, funk, and what would eventually become rap. In 1976, Detroit witnessed a moment that even for Aerosmith seemed surreal. During a show, Steven spotted a woman in the audience and proposed to her right there on stage. The crowd roared, but backstage erupted into chaos. His girlfriend, Bebe Buell, stormed the stage and confronted him in a scene that looked like something out of a film. Within hours, the incident was making headlines nationwide. Aerosmith had long carried a reputation for chaos, but the Detroit incident made the world realize just how tangled Steven Tyler's personal life had become. Their 1976 album Rocks arrived with brutal force, and Back in the Saddle cracked through speakers with a whip sound that felt almost alive. But capturing that sound became a battle of its own. The band first tried using an actual bullwhip, an experiment that went nowhere and left more bruises than results. After hours of frustration, they ended up swinging a 30-foot cord and firing a cap gun at the exact moment of impact to create the effect the song demanded. Rocks climbed to number 3 on the charts, yet underneath the success something was unraveling. Steven's voice began to slur during performances, leaving audiences puzzled and sometimes angry. Drugs were sinking their roots in deep, and not even fame could hide it anymore. Then came the 1977 Rolling Stones tour. In Baton Rouge, Tyler stepped beside Mick Jagger and tore into Brown Sugar as though the stage belonged to them both. Critics called it electric, but the glow faded behind the curtain. Tyler nearly overdosed after sharing heroin with Jagger, collapsing just hours after delivering one of his most confident performances. It was a quiet warning of what was about to hit even harder. During the Draw the Line sessions the same year, Tyler injected heroin in the studio and collapsed mid-take. Recording halted for weeks. The delays sank more than $200,000, and producers struggled to pull a sober, steady vocal from him. Rumors swirled. Fans whispered. Even insiders weren't certain Aerosmith would survive. By 1979, the tension finally erupted. Backstage in West Hollywood, a bizarre argument ignited when Tom Hamilton's wife, Terry, was splashed with milk by Joe Perry's wife, Alyssa. Steven snapped and swung at Perry. The fight exploded instantly. Hours later, Joe Perry walked away from the band entirely. Years of ego, exhaustion, and drug-fueled volatility had led to that breaking point. Only a year later, on July 9th in Portland, Maine, the consequences turned deadly serious. Steven overdosed on methadone during a show. He collapsed into Joey Kramer's drum set, unconscious, as the band played on without realizing. He needed CPR before being rushed to the hospital, and the rest of the tour was canceled. It was the clearest signal yet that something was deeply wrong, but change remained distant. After Perry's exit, guitarist Jimmy Crespo stepped in, helping shape rock in a hard place in 1982. Tyler was barely present during these sessions. When he did arrive, he was often numbed by Percocet, delivering vocals that sounded thin and exhausted. The album reached only number 37, Aerosmith's lowest point since their early days. Critics said the record sounded like a band falling apart. And, in truth, it was. In 1983, the remaining members tried to save Steven from himself. They met him at Café La Fortuna and begged him to enter rehab. He agreed. 30 days at Hazelden followed, 30 days of hallucinations, pain, and detox that stripped him to the core. He emerged clearer, but emotionally distant. The scars between him and the other members didn't disappear so easily. A year later, he overdosed again, this time a mix of Valium and vodka in a hotel room. Paramedics revived him. The shock pushed him into his first AA meeting, the beginning of a long and uneven road to recovery. By 1985, the possibility of Joe Perry returning felt almost within reach, but Tyler relapsed during rehearsals, and the fragile reunion collapsed. He drifted into small projects, including a cameo in Rogues Gallery in 1986, where his slurred lines had to be re-recorded. The mid-'80s felt like a lost era, professionally and personally. Tyler's private life during these years was just as complicated. In 1976, he had a brief relationship with Bebe Buell, who became pregnant and gave birth to Liv Tyler on July 1, 1977. Fearing Steven's lifestyle, Bebe listed Todd Rundgren as Liv's father. Liv didn't discover the truth until 1991, when a DNA test revealed her real parentage. She was 14. The revelation was painful, but in time, she built a relationship with Steven. Tyler married Serinda Fox on September 1, 1978, and their daughter Mia was born that December. But drugs, infidelity, and the endless demands of touring tore the marriage apart. They divorced in 1987. Serinda struggled in the years that followed and passed away in 2002. Mia's childhood became a collage of memories of a father constantly leaving, returning, and disappearing again. The darkest chapter of Tyler's past traced back to 1973, when he entered a relationship with Julia Holcomb, who was just 16. He became her legal guardian so she could travel with him. Decades later, a lawsuit revealed painful accounts of manipulation, drugs, and deep trauma. Tyler called his choices crimes of passion, but the public saw something far more disturbing, an enduring scar in his legacy. After divorcing Serinda, he married Teresa Barrick in 1988. Their two children, Chelsea and Taj, were born in 1989 and 1991, but Tyler's addictions continued to strain their marriage. They separated in 2005 and finalized their divorce the following year. In 2011, he became engaged to Erin Brady, a partner who helped him confront parts of his past. Their relationship ended in 2013 when she discovered letters from old flames dating back to the 1970s. Tyler admitted he was haunted by shame over who he once was. Years later, he found stability with Amy Preston, who had originally been hired as his assistant. They made their relationship public in 2016, marking one of the first steady chapters of his personal life in decades. Amy Preston was 38 years younger than Steven Tyler, but their connection grew naturally, through recovery work, shared wounds, and the quiet steadiness both of them needed. Around the same time, something far bigger was shifting. Tyler was finally getting clean, and Aerosmith was rising from the ashes. In August 1987, the band released Permanent Vacation. Dude, Looks Like a Lady, climbed to number 17, and the album moved more than 4 million copies. Aerosmith was suddenly unavoidable, on MTV, on radio, on magazine covers. Tyler was sober, sharp, creative again, and determined to take his life back. By 1989, Rolling Stone named them America's #1 hard rock band. Then Pump hit. Janie's Got a Gun became the centerpiece, layered with more than 50 stacked vocal tracks. It reached number 4, won their first Grammy, and helped push the album past 7 million U.S. sales. In 1990, Aerosmith played for roughly 1 million people in Moscow. Tyler crowd-surfed and flashed peace signs at Soviet guards as if Cold War boundaries didn't apply to him. It became one of the most surreal concerts of the decade. 3 years later came Get a Grip, over 20 million copies sold worldwide. Crying exploded on MTV. Tyler even jumped off a cliff during the video shoot, broke 3 ribs, and still finished filming. 2 Grammys followed. By the mid-90s, Aerosmith was officially back on top. In 1994, their ballpark tour earned $35 million. Tyler briefly relapsed backstage in Detroit, but stopped himself quickly and returned to sobriety. The momentum never fully broke again. 9 Lives arrived in 1997 and nearly flopped, until Pink revived the album. Tyler rode an elephant in the music video, and the record hit #1, eventually selling over 6 million copies. He dedicated the song to his father, who passed away in 2001. Then came the song that changed everything. In 1998, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing debuted at #1 and stayed there for 4 straight weeks. It sold over 1 million copies in its first month and helped push the Armageddon soundtrack past 11 million worldwide. Tyler's trembling, emotional delivery turned it into a global classic. But Tyler's influence had started reshaping music years earlier. Back in July 1986, he walked into Magic Ventures' studio expecting an ordinary day, only to find himself face-to-face with Run DMC. Together they re-recorded Walk This Way, blending the 1975 Aerosmith hit with the raw edge of hip-hop. Rock and rap almost never touched at the time, but this one track broke the wall. When it dropped, it shot to #4 on the Billboard Hot 100. Aerosmith's sales jumped from 2,000 albums a week to more than 10,000. MTV ran the video constantly. Rap rock became real, and bands like Limp Bizkit and Linkin Park eventually followed through the door that Tyler and Run DMC kicked open. Decades later, Tyler found himself in an entirely different kind of spotlight. In 2011, he became a judge on American Idol, earning between $8 and $10 million per season. His unpredictability and humor lit up the screen. He famously kissed contestant Pia Toscano on the cheek, sending tabloids into a frenzy. He claimed the show made him travel 250,000 miles, and the grind wore him down. He left after season 12. His team wasn't thrilled. Jennifer Lopez earned nearly twice his salary, and his bandmates felt the career detour created tension within Aerosmith. After he quit the show, Keith Urban slid into the judging chair while Tyler returned to music full-time. Years before all that, he had already opened his life to the world with his 2006 memoir, Does the Noise in My Head Bother You? The book debuted at #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. Its pages were raw, $20 million burned on drugs, chaotic parties, explosive fights, rehab stints, and the collateral damage he left behind. One of the darkest confessions was a suicide attempt in 1986, when he swallowed 30 pills before his girlfriend saved him. Readers were stunned, but captivated. His acting work came in small bursts, but always with charm. In 1993, he appeared in Wayne's World 2, playing a roadie version of himself with a harmonica in hand. Later, in 2005's Be Cool, he joked about his own aging reflection. He never chased Hollywood, but whenever he turned up, he left a fingerprint. As he grew older, Tyler's energy shifted towards something deeper. In 2015, reflecting on the pain behind Janie's Got a Gun, he founded Janie's Fund to help abused and traumatized girls. By 2025, the fund had raised $25 million, paid for 66,000 therapy days for 525 girls, and operated across 12 states plus Washington, D.C. It aimed to support nearly 4,000 girls annually. In 2021, he opened a new center and personally spent time with the girls. It became one of the most impactful charitable efforts ever launched by a rock musician. But life still tested him. In 2011, Tyler released his country-leaning solo album We're All Somebody from Somewhere, working with Carrie Underwood and others. It hit #1 on the top country albums chart and sold around 16,800 pure copies in its first week. Red, White and You Felt Bold, while Hold On carried the honesty of a man who had survived countless near endings. The album came on the heels of another relapse scare, a reminder that recovery never fully rests. That fragility had surfaced earlier, in 2009, when he underwent surgery on both feet at once for severe bunions caused by years of tight stage boots and acrobatic performances. Doctors put him on OxyContin. The pain spiraled into dependence. After more than a decade of sobriety, he slipped into prescription drug addiction and checked himself into the Betty Ford Center in December 2009. Aerosmith had to cancel their tour, but Tyler returned in time for the 2010 Grammys. He spoke openly about the relapse, warning fans about the danger of painkillers. Just when things steadied again, disaster struck. On August 5, 2011, he crashed his motorcycle in Maui. He walked away with a fractured shoulder, a deep head cut requiring 20 stitches, and a lacerated liver. 8 surgeries followed. But only weeks later, he appeared at the 2011 VMAs with his arm in a sling, cracking jokes about his rock and roll bones before belting out a piece of Dream On. The crash forced more tour cancellations, but his refusal to stay off stage showed how deeply performing remained wired into his soul. Then came the shock of 2023. Aerosmith launched their Peace Out Farewell Tour at UBS Arena on September 9th. In the opening moments of the show, Steven Tyler pushed too hard, felt something tear inside his throat, and fractured his larynx. The injury caused internal bleeding, and he staggered on stage before the pain forced him to stop. Doctors told him he would need months to heal, and warned he might never fully recover. Aerosmith postponed the rest of the tour, leaving fans stunned. Tyler's voice had carried the band for more than half a century, and now it was suddenly fragile. The moment showed how even the strongest frontman can be undone by time. In 2024, Tyler tried everything. Stem cell injections in Utah and Nashville offered hope but no guarantees. He rested, trained, and pushed for every inch of recovery. But by August, doctors delivered the final verdict: the damage was permanent. Aerosmith announced they would retire from touring after more than 50 years. It felt inevitable, but painful, like watching an entire era of classic rock lower its curtain. And still, he found ways to sing. In February 2025, Tyler appeared at the Jam for Janie charity event in Los Angeles, his first performance since the injury. He sang 3 songs, including Dream On and Walk This Way. His voice was rough, his neck visibly swollen, but the crowd rose to its feet. Doctors begged him not to push himself, and the bruising around his throat showed the cost. Yet he gave the room everything he had left. Later that year at the 2025 VMAs, he joined Joe Perry for a tribute to Ozzy Osbourne, singing Mama, I'm Coming Home. Tyler barely moved, guarding his throat, but the quiet intensity of the performance earned another standing ovation. Moments after walking off stage, he was rushed to the hospital for vocal strain. It was a reminder that even diminished, he could still hit people straight in the heart, and that every note now came with a price. With touring behind him, he poured himself deeper into Janie's fund. In 2025, using $10 million saved from the canceled tour, he opened a new girls' center in Tennessee. It offered therapy, residential care, and long-term support for hundreds of girls each year. The center became a living symbol of who he had become, a man turning his own pain outward into something healing. But as all this unfolded, the public began talking about something else: the way he was aging. At the 2025 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, cameras lingered on his face. Deep forehead lines suggested heavy Botox use in the 2010s, despite his old claims, back in 2007, that he only used eye creams. Side-by-side photos from the 2000s and 2020s sparked debates about genetics, cosmetic work, and the toll of half a century spent on stages, buses, and hotel floors. Some fans even speculated that his unusually smooth look in earlier decades came from the aftereffects of heroin use, an eerie, controversial theory that resurfaced as age finally caught up with him. His face became a symbol of how complicated aging is for rock icons: too visible, too judged, too mythologized. Meanwhile, his partner Amy Preston quietly showed the world a different side. In 2025, she shared glimpses of his home life on Instagram: simple moments in the kitchen, soft mornings on the porch, evenings with friends. Fans noticed tremors in his hands, which many believed were lingering effects of past drug abuse. Even so, Tyler practiced yoga almost every day. He had discovered yoga in his 60s, and it kept him flexible, centered, and grounded. At 77, he moved slower, but the spark was unmistakable. He cooked. He laughed. He played harmonica in the living room. He jammed with friends just for the joy of it. The tremors were reminders of what he had survived, not signs of defeat. His home life felt quiet and real, finally. For the first time, the world could see Steven Tyler not as the screaming frontman or the wild man of the 70s, but as a survivor still learning, still healing, still holding on to whatever music he had left inside him.